An onslaught of war cries and thunderous stomps fell on Joe's ears as he stood there in the pitch-black darkness. He could see nothing, surrounded only by the cries of men and the clashing of steel. War, Joe thought to himself as he reached for his sword. But it was not there. Nothing was. He was standing there naked and alone. Suddenly the sounds dissipated, and complete silence fell on his ears. In the distance, a golden object shone like a beacon in the sea of blackness. Joe made his way to it, trudging along across the unmistakable feeling of wet grass. Though he could not see it, there was no doubt in his mind that the ground beneath him was drenched in crimson red. As he reached the center of the glow, he found a golden crown, the same crown that King Abraham had worn since his ascension. Only this time it was bent and broken and stained with blood. He reached for the crown, and when he picked it up, the darkness faded, and he found himself standing in a field of grass. Gone were any signs of a battle, replaced by a bright blue sky and the chirping of summer birds. But on the ground where the crown had previously laid was a pool of blood, with a trail leading from it to some bushes a few yards back. Lord Joe followed the trail and parted the bushes, only to be met with a gruesome sight. An eagle's nest with 2 dead eagles, one bloodied and broken, the other a withered husk. In the middle of the nest was a dead and bloated snake, gorged on eagle eggs. A fickle movement caught Joe's eye, and he turned to see a second snake, much thinner but shorter, slither away into the distance. As his eyes dwelled on the horizon, his view transformed to the ceiling above his bed. He had finally woken up from that horrible dream. 3 nights it had been since the council meeting, and 3 times that dream had haunted him. There was little sleep to be gained for Joe, with his mind constantly dwelling on the proposal Lord Jordan had laid before him. Lord Joe's chambers were dark, lit only by streaks of silver cast from the moon hanging above Washington. The night is still young, Joe thought to himself, observing that the moon had yet to reach its highest point, but it bothered him little. He had grown used to early awakenings. For how could a man claim his sleep when his mind lingered on betrayal? Seeing no point in staring at the ceiling, Lord Joe rushed to his feet and threw on some robes to hide his skin. Only wine had any hope of dulling his senses and averting his thoughts from the council meeting, and so he trekked across the stone floor of his bedroom, intent on raiding his own private kitchen. But as he reached the common room just outside his bedroom, he found that he was not the only one plagued by a lack of sleep.
Hunter, what are you doing awake at this hour?
Sir Hunter Biden stood by an open window, leaning out and staring at the sleeping city below. He was still adorned in his golden armor, with his trusted sword sheathed on his left hip.
I could ask the same of you, Father.
Sir Hunter responded, turning around to meet Lord Joe's gaze.
But perhaps you have simply come to detest sleeping, seeing as you have spent the past 3 nights wide awake?
Sir Hunter smiled. Though he wanted to humor his father, there was a semblance of concern on his face. That much Joe could see, even in the dark. So you have noticed, Joe thought to himself as he strolled around the room to light the myriad of candles that surrounded them, each new flame banishing its own speck of shadow. The moon no longer held sole responsibility for illuminating the common room.
For me, it's the tournament. I never sleep much during the nights leading up to one. I suppose the anticipation simply won't allow it. But what about you, Father? What has been keeping you up these past nights?
Lord Joe had not told Sir Hunter of Jordan's proposal, but perhaps now was as good a time as any. After all, he had to act quickly if he was to ensure that Hunter won the Queen's hand over Lord Donald's own son. And with the rest of White Castle sound asleep, the chances that the walls would listen were slim.
Come, son, we must talk.
Lord Joe sat down at the table in the middle of the room, gesturing Sir Hunter to join him. The clanging of chain on plate from Hunter's armor grew louder with every step, but there was a serene sense of safety to the sound. It reminded Joe that no matter who was in the room with them, the toughest fighter would always be his own son.
What I am about to tell you is not yet public knowledge. King Abraham means to declare it after the tournament on his name day, and so I need your word that whatever is said between us now will never leave this room.
Sir Hunter looked worried. He furrowed his brows, his throat tightening. Eventually, he gave his father an approving nod, and Lord Joe proceeded to fill him in on all the details that were presented during the council meeting.
King Hunter Biden, is that what you hope to gain from this?
Sir Hunter leaned back in his chair, tapping the wooden table with the tips of his fingers. Lord Joe nodded, giving his son a half-hearted smile, but was not met with the same look of enthusiasm.
You know my dreams lie with the royal guard, Father. I want to protect the Queen, not marry her. Find someone else, and I will gladly protect them both.
Lord Joe clenched his fist and took a deep breath.
How many times must I tell you to set aside those foolish ambitions? A member of the royal guard cannot marry or father children. You are my only son, and it is your duty to ensure that House Biden lives on.
But Father...
There was a knock on the door. The two of them went silent. It was still the middle of the night, far too early for anyone to bring mundane news. With an approving nod from his father, Sir Hunter rose from his chair and approached the door. With one hand on the hilt of his sword, he slowly pulled open the door, breathing a sigh of relief as he saw who was on the other side.
Sir Hunter, good to see you. I need to speak to your father urgently.
Sir Hunter stepped aside, letting Lord Barack into the room. Following him was Lady Michelle Obama, who Hunter had not yet noticed. She was a beautiful and elegant woman, radiating a sense of authority that matched that of her husband. Lord Joe smiled at the two of them, but could not hide the tinge of confusion he had on his face.
Lady Michelle, as beautiful as ever. What brings you two here at such a late hour?
Does your son know? Have you told him yet?
Lord Barack asked. Lord Joe needed no further specification. He understood what Barack was referring to, and with that he nodded, which prompted Barack to do the same towards his wife.
Tell me what you know about this,
Lady Michelle said, producing a vial of clear liquid from inside her gown, placing it on the table before them.
It is odorless, tasteless, and colorless. Do you know what it is?
Sounds an awful lot like plain water to me. Is this some sort of joke?
Lady Michelle scoffed and shook her head. She did not seem surprised by Joe's response. Perhaps she had come to expect it.
It is a rare substance from the lands of Europa across the Eastern Sea. Rumor has it that the brothels there are quite fond of it. They call it tears of regret, and apparently one sip of this will leave a woman infertile for an entire day.
If this thing truly works the way you describe, then how come I have never heard of it before?
Lord Barack placed a hand on Joe's shoulder.
Because, my friend, there are no brothels in Great America, and the price of one vial is nothing short of outrageous.
True, there were no brothels in Great America. The gods would never permit it. Lord Joe could not shake the notion that the existence of such a substance was far too convenient, and with it perfectly resembling water, there was no way to know for certain if it actually worked.
What if the king is not truly infertile? What if Queen Mary has sipped a few of these drops on every occasion, ensuring that she will never get pregnant?
And why would she do that? Surely you are not suggesting that she is intentionally ruining both her own and the royal family line.
A valid question. The queen had never shown anything but affection for her husband, and the healers had assured the king that infertility remained with him. As rare as the tears of regret might be, it would be foolish to assume that the healers had not heard of it.
No one would suggest such a thing, Joe. What frightens me is how easy it would be for the Queen to consume such a substance without her knowing. Just think about how many times you have heard a man lose his fertility. Never before. Something is not adding up.
Joe pondered. Perhaps the dream that had repeated itself was trying to tell him something. He had yet to tell anyone about it, but then again, he was not a superstitious man. Was this the right moment to bring it forward, he wondered? No, he thought to himself, whatever happens, the king must remain infertile. Hunter Biden will be king.